So we are in Chester city centre, and this is Bridge Street. The three old arches are the oldest building in Chester. 1274 is written down, painted on. And the reason why I've come here is because something very interesting happened here for me during the last few periods when we were locked down in our homes. I actually decided not to lock down in my home, and I came here for the day with my son. And I'll show you why in a moment. (1818), 1664, I mean, they're beautiful buildings. I used to come here all the time as a child. My family live in North Wales, all of them. And we'd come here, and I'd be so excited to come here. Cherubs on there. I'm not sure if you can see them. I'll show you a bit more of Chester, since we are here. Look at that. Some nice 60s buildings plonked in the middle there. Well, okay. These are called Varrows, and they are steps to sort of like an indoor shopping centre from the ancient times. God's providence is mine inheritance. 1652. So yeah, these are the rows, and this is why I came to Chester during lockdown. So I was like everyone else. I was a mum of a young child at that time, and all of the children's playgrounds had been cordoned off with hazard tape, and I felt that was ridiculous, and I wanted my son to have some I wanted my son to have some fun. And I remember coming here as a child myself when we used to visit my family. And we'd go on to here and we would slide down the slopes. So we'd go running up on these towards the fence, but some of them had steep slopes, which as a child reminded me of slides in a playground. So I brought my son here and we climbed to the top of these and slide down to the bottom during lockdown, so that he was still getting his slides. Just a slope rather than a slide, but still. And then while we were here, I got chatting to a man, because there was only us and one man in the city centre here. And the man, he looked very differently dressed to everyone else that you'd see in this city centre. You know, you see people in jeans and jumper just like I'm dressed. And he was dressed in a tweed suit, and he just looked very well dressed for the occasion. Try and go up here. See the three arches. So yeah, 1274 AD, according to the paintwork. And he was telling me, this man dressed in a tweed suit, that his family originate from here, Chester, along with many different sorts of celebrities. Their families, not necessarily them, but their families. And he was saying that that during the Black Death or the plague, many people ran from Chester. They fled because they were so scared of the idea of dying because of this pandemic or epidemic, the plague. So Chester basically emptied, and the Duke of Westminster arrived and bought up all the properties. Now I do know that the Duke of Westminster does own much of Chester and London, so that's interesting. And I said, oh right, okay, that's interesting. And he said, well, you see, my family were here beforehand, and the monasteries owned Chester. And that's led me to wonder about the idea of a Millennial Kingdom. And so I'm returning to have a look around Chester to discover a bit more about how the Duke of Westminster purchased Chester. And I'm doing research into the tally sticks, how they were removed and gotten rid of in the 1800s as a source of currency and replaced. More of this very beautiful city. And I'm going to visit the monastery, which I understand owned all of Chester. In the meantime, we'll have a look around. Gonna get run over. King Edward VII. Netting on it, probably to keep the pigeons off. Grosvenor Hotel, that plaque looks new though. Can't have always been a hotel. Yeah, 1865. 1800s. 1897. (1883). Just as we make our way over to the monastery, this is the Roman garden. I don't think this is an original, this is rebuilt. But this is said to be the Roman garden, using artifacts found in various parts of Chester, which are believed to be Roman. And I'll take you to the amphitheatre. All the remains of it, at least. Because that takes us over to the monastery anyway. It's a bit of a miserable day, really. So that was the stairway to seating of the amphitheatre. Look at that old ruin. I bet that doesn't have a date on it. And it's that building that we're heading to. Does look like it had a fire. It looks untouched. Probably been repurposed into flats at some point, like everything is. This was a wealthy area from Tudor times and one of the most fashionable parts of Chester, St. John's Church. D House. Being careful not to tread in the puddle. Henry VIII, destruction of the monasteries. In the 18th century, a number of fine mansions with elaborate gardens were built in this area, and one was St. John's House, and we're going to go over there now because this is the monastery that the man was talking about, which owned Chester before the Duke of Westminster took over. And I believe that the Duke of Westminster is cousins with the Queen and the Rothschilds, which tells us that they are in the financial system, which is why I'm interested in the tally sticks which were burned in the 1800s, because there was a time when there was financial freedom. And I have been questioning if the Millennial Kingdom, or the reign of Jesus, has been and gone. The clock says 1887, but again, that's just etched on the clock. So there was a takeover in the 1800s, which we don't know about. We laid them out to slumber till the last glorious morn. That implies to me that the end times has been and gone. And I didn't know about this until that man spoke to me. In the mid-16th century, England broke away from the Catholic Church. That was through Henry VIII. King Edward VI's commissioners stripped the church roof of lead and began to demolish the eastern chapels. Services continued in the ruin nave. Oh wow, they were not giving up, were they? Cornerstone. The cornerstone of this belfry and tower clock and clock tower was laid by William Stubbs, Bishop of Chester, 1886. Now this is definitely newer in build than these ruins over here. So I do believe that in the 1800s there were a lot of demolitions and destructions. But the reason why I question all of this is because in America and in Australia, very new countries, they also had these great fires and destructions, and so I don't trust this history here, because I cannot trust American history when I look at some of the buildings there and the narratives around them. So you can actually see a bird. You can actually see the new building and the old monastery. And it was these monasteries here which owned Chester before the Duke of Westminster. And the man who I spoke to said that he implied that they were paid off, basically. A lot of people were paid off and given a large amount of money to go along with the story, which I can believe happened. But he said a lot of the people were given riches, fame, say fame and fortune. And he said a lot of the ancestors are still in existence today, and they are business people, and they are celebrities. And this was really my kind of conversation, because I love this kind of conversation. Because I don't believe in the narrative of today, and I don't believe in the narrative of history. Got a great big puddle there. On there. I hope I can read this. Look at that. I'm glad it's still standing. Shows determination, doesn't it? Right. Ugh. I'm going to struggle with this. It replaced a Norman chapel, which was semicircular. This is the most complete part. Sir Peter Rota, Lord of Thornton, who in 1349 helped to pay for much of the repairs. The chapel has a complex history. Look around for the clues. As part of a church, it would have looked very fine with a stone vaulted roof. After the demolition of the choir, the chapel was converted into living accommodation for the minor clergy. Dolt to dolt. Right, let's have a wander around. Northeastern chapel. Great mounds of soil. You can barely see any of the details now. You can definitely tell the difference between the 1800 building and this one. However, what I would say is that both buildings have moss all over them, and this one might be looking more weathered because no roof. Obviously. It is glass. Oh, I can see a bit of modern day art bunged in there now. Just to claim it our own. So I find this very interesting because I've got a lot of questions. I do find myself watching a lot about Christian beliefs. I find that really interesting, and I would say that I'm a Christian. But I don't do the whole church thing, although my son does, and he tells me fascinating stories, which is where I got my fascination in Christianity from. I put him in a faith school as a child, and well, he really enjoyed that. So I do read the Bible, but I'm very confused by it, and I'm trying to better understand it, I guess. Look at that building, the University of Chester. It's quite grand, isn't it? That must have been one of the mansions, maybe. And there's a bridge, an old bridge. God's reeked with history. I know because my family are all Welsh, and particularly in North Wales, I know that Wales is just littered with castles everywhere, and that was the Celts, or the Britons, because the Britons are the ancient Britons, not the Anglo-Saxons. And on my mum's side, I am a Celt, and she is fully Celt. But on my dad's side, they are Anglo-Saxon, which is funny considering the history. I suppose. And knowing that information, that's made me even more interested in this idea of the millennial reign. I know that there is this idea of Tartaria, and I can appreciate that. But there are some issues which I take with the idea of Tartaria. I do know that things can be replicated easily, And I suppose what we've got to go on is maps, ancient maps. There's no understanding of how they would have received those ideas of an advanced society. I think the Tartars are sort of from around Turkey, which may assume that they are Jewish descendants, and there may have been mysticism involved in that. I do believe that there is a lot of mysticism involved in everything, really, because you think of these times in the 1200s and the 1100s, and after 1066, I think it was when we would have seen the Normans and the Vikings arrive here, because presumably a Millennial Kingdom would have been after 66 AD to 1066. And then the Normans arrived 1066. I believe that in Revelation 20 it says that Satan has his season. Well, if you think about seasons of the year, they are divided equally, 4 seasons in a year, and they are of equal periods of time, or near enough. So if Jesus were to have 1,000 years within the whole timeline of time in existence, that would be a season, and so Satan would have the same amount of time, because God is a fair and just God, which would mean that Satan, I'm trying to get to that building over there, would have had the same amount of time. Because if you think about it, also in Revelation 20, it says that the dead in Christ are gathered for judgment, and those who are not dead in Christ are gathered for judgment on their works. Or something like that. I'll have to reread it. But this looks very Victorian, doesn't it? That bridge. Definitely does have that Victorian tone. 1800s, definitely. So this is the building. I can't see how to get in. I don't think you can get in. Which is a shame. Look at that. Look at the stone below at the bottom. That looks melted. So, if they're all going to be judged on their works, then that would assume that God has to show the 8 fallen angels that he is just and that they were wrong to leave. There's a swan. And if that's the case, so that they can repent, really. Because if he gives Jesus 1,000 years and then gave Satan only a small, short version of that, like 200 years or something, then that's not just or fair, is it? Because not only does he need to prove he's a fair and just God to man and humans, but he also needs to prove it to he also needs to prove that to the fallen angels and all of the angels, I would imagine. So I would have to believe that he will give Satan 1,000 years, which would take Satan up to 2066 if the Millennial Kingdom was from 66 to 1066. Look at those houses. I wonder if they're still houses or if they've been turned into flats. Everything gets turned into flats. So I do believe that God will give Satan the same amount of time as Jesus. And I believe that it could be the case that we are living in Satan's reign. I don't know about followers of this, but I've always felt uncomfortable in society. I've never felt at ease, so to speak. And it feels even more so difficult now. And I wonder, just as Jesus, in his reign, there were birth pains and things intensified, would that be the same in Satan's reign? And if the end of Satan's reign is 2066, although we don't know, but I guess I think that there's no stopping. There's not much about Satan's reign, and there's not much mentioned that you shouldn't try to guess. In the reign of Jesus, then in the 1,000 years, I think, well, I might be confused about it. I think they're saying, don't try and guess the time. Of my return. And a lot of the people who I've been watching have been talking about us in the end times, and Jesus is about to return. And that never made sense to me, because I said to my son, you'd think that the end times had been and gone with the Romans. And he said, yeah, that's how I feel about it. So he said that's one of the things which makes me question the Bible. And in that case, that's part of a trickery, because Satan returns to deceive the world. So he has to mimic end times for that judgment. In time for it. So that the people are cast into the lake of fire. And that's another thing which I'm interested in. Is the lake of fire Satan's earth? So God creates a new earth in heaven, but the lake of fire is still in existence. So presumably Satan rules over that, and the reason why he is tormented is because he can't rebuild Earth, and he can't rebuild those buildings from the Millennial Kingdom, which got destroyed. And maybe because he can't do that, the minions of his feel angry and frustrated because they've been lied to. Because life will still continue in the lake of fire, because torment is an emotion, isn't it? So or it's a state of mind or a state of being. So existence continues and being continues in the lake of fire, but just it's I'm trying to think of the words. It's not the Millennial Kingdom, and that's what's so tormenting. Because if I showed that 1960s addition to this beautiful city earlier in the video, and it looked ugly. This city is so pretty, and then there was that 1960s monstrosity just plonked there with no thought or consideration whatsoever. Is that what is going to be built in in the lake of fire. Now they're saying that this was built, that part, the newer part was built in the 1800s. But what if the newer part was built in the 1300s? I'm just looking at this. Sir Peter Rota, Lord of Thornton, who in 1349 helped to pay for much needed repairs. Well, we've just walked through Chester, which has buildings from 1200. And although it's definite that that is newer, go up close, this part is certainly newer than this part, which has been destroyed. What if it was actually completed earlier, during that 1300s stint, but we're just being told that it was the 1800s because everything happened in the 1800s. I don't believe that. All over the world simultaneously. Now I can believe it from a certain perspective because we saw lockdown happen, and I can believe that people may have fled. This is interesting. That must have been a window. Can you see it? It was either a window or a little door. And then you have this huge door. Because some people are saying about the Nephilim and giants, which I like the idea of. Look at that door. And that door. I like the idea of that. And then I think about Merlin, though, and Merlin was when? Around about the time of 1100s, maybe? After the Norman conquest? Now, was he a Nephilim? Because his mother was human and his father was a demon. See, that's something that holds me back against the Millennial Kingdom, because was it the case that is it the case that Nephilim or demons could not have existed, or could they have existed even during the time of his reign, but within that time, his power and his influence, Jesus's power and influence, was so powerful that people just disregarded and avoided the sort of demonic entities. And obviously there are stories of Jesus ridding people of demons. So a lot to think about. And the reason why I'm talking about this on my podcast is because I do find it to be the Bible to be very influential in my writing, particularly the element of deceit. And having been observing what I've been observing in recent years, I have to question the time that we are in. And that is, writing fiction is my way of exploring these ideas without offending too many people. That's a park. Anyway, I won't bother going to there. But I might come back here. There's lovely places with 1800s buildings in North Wales as well. Llandudno's one. There's a lot of questions which I have about reality and mysticism and folklore. Oh, bless me. And the reality of how we are today. And for that reason, I do feel the need to explore it within my fiction. It's an easy way, it's a better way of exploring ideas without claiming them to be facts. And of course, I don't know what facts are. My upcoming book is called The Harvest, and it's set today in sort of present times, or in a short-term future. Then I have another one, The Prime Minister's Invitation. That's set around about the 60s. So it's kind of a prequel, and I've got a lot of prequels to this series, which is called Exiled. And these books just keep coming into my head all the time. And I've got to get them written down. Look at that. So on that building, I'm not sure if I can... You have Antiquitech. Or what the Tartarian researchers called Antiquitech. On that building, a 5G. Oh dear. Yes. We certainly don't make pretty things in this time, do we? Anyway, my books, they're written so that I can explore these ideas without making any claims of them being true. And so if that interests you, then please do look into buying them or reading them. I'm listening to the hum of the traffic, and it sounds like bees. Sounds like a swarm of bees working. I'm not sure if you can hear that too. Look at that bridge. Look at that street. You have that 1960s clumpy, disgusting building in the background. This is what I'm thinking of the Lake of Fire and the tormenting, because that is so ugly. And then look at that. Anyway, I thought that I'd take you through a tour to this place, because it was that man and his discussion that the monasteries owned Chester before the Duke of Westminster did that blew my mind. And I had to come back here, and I thought, when I come back I'll do a video of I'll do a video of all of those, of all of this. Look at that, all those walls. The walled city. There's definitely something about walled cities. And the walled cities keeping people safe. Let's get rid of that because I don't want anything. Anyway, let's just try not to walk through the arches of the 60s. Look at this. Look at that. And what's this great big clump? That. What a mess. It's a shame that they've done that. Yeah. More here. Oh, look at it. Oh. Look at that building. I'm saying that I'm going, but I'm not going, am I? That's definitely a castle. And that's right opposite the monstrosity, the 60s monstrosity. You see, I just can't believe that it would be a nice place in the Lake of Fire. I'm looking at 60s buildings and I'm thinking, no, it's going to be ugly. It's still going to continue its existence, but it's going to be ugly. Look at those crosses on the top of the sort of bricked in some information here. A drill hall built in 1868 for training. The cost of £2,500 and it was demolished in 1983, but the facade has been retained. And then we can go over and walk towards the 1960s. Look at that, that's pretty. Welsh Congregational Chapel. Well, you know, that's interesting because there are claims that Chester is Welsh. It was Welsh. And it was taken over by the Anglo-Saxons. Is that a home? That is so pretty. A converted chapel into a home. Oh, that's so pretty. Yeah, oh, it's flats. It's flats. Everything is flats. This is what I'm seeing coming. Just flats everywhere. So I'm very interested in the Bible and what's coming in the future. And we'll just carry on a bit further up here. I know that it's the 60s monstrosity. It might be 70s, I don't know. They haven't got a plaque on there yet. I'm sure they will do when it turns into the Fire of Lake. The Lake of Fire, even. Fire of Lake. So I'm sorry about the way that the video ended, and I've decided that I will return to Chester because I saw some buildings built in the 1300s, but it had two stones, one for the 1300s and one for the 1800s, and unfortunately my camera had no charge, no battery left, so that's why it went out. And I think that I will return. I hope that it was an interesting video. I'm expecting that maybe the images made it a little bit more interesting, hopefully. And I hope the sound was okay. If you've ever had interests in the Millennial Kingdom and you're sort of interested in that concept that Jesus's reign has been and gone, then this is something that I'm going to try and talk about a little bit more often. So in that case, please do subscribe and like and leave a comment. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this. And I'll return back to this, and I'll probably do some more videos out and about looking at these architecture and just talking about my thoughts about what I think could be going on and where I'm kind of exploring through different means. I might look through research as well, but certainly writing into books these ideas. So please like, subscribe and leave a comment. I'd love to hear your comments. Thank you very much. Bye.